So I know little to nothing about music. I know something about music, but it's little to nothing at this point because it's been a very long time since I've played any instrument and engaged with music as someone who is playing music. But I want to talk about music today because it connects back to language, or at least I think it connects back to language. And I have this specific writing rule that writing follows language, and I think that it's probably true that music follows language as well. Welcome to How to Write Good. I am your host, Daniel Poppie. You can find out more about me at danielpoppie.com. If it is your first time here, How to Write Good is a writing podcast that seeks to find principles and advice that can be applied across a broad range of writing situations. If you've been here before, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button below, and share. Writing follows language. This is a statement that I would back up. This is a statement in terms of writing philosophy that it's a hill I would die on in terms of writing philosophy as of now, because I see no reason to disregard it. It makes so much sense to say that writing follows language because writing it's within language. It's within how we speak. It's influenced how we speak. It's influenced how we engage with language. So therefore, I think it would follow language. So that is one of my writing rules, actually. And I have about 14 of them. But it's one of my first writing rules. I think it's my first, second, or third. So it's a very important writing rule. And I've come across stuff with music recently about music and different cultures and how different cultures approach music differently. And you might be able to chalk it up to the cultures themselves. But one thing I've run into, and I've seen this in the past as well, is that in the West we have 12 tones. In the West we have 12 tones in our music, and I'm not sure exactly how they play off of one another, and I think to a certain degree there are half tones, but I think in general we have 12 tones, and that's what we're building our music from. And it feels very natural to us. And if we go outside of those 12 tones, if we go to half tones or quarter tones or however it would work, it feels wrong. It's not something that we would want to listen to it because we're used to 12 tones in our music. Now in India, they have more than 12 tones within their music. I think it's at least twice as more because I think they have half steps within their tones. So when you listen to Indian music, it sounds a lot different, and it sounds a lot more to our ears who have 12 tones in our music. It sounds warbly. It sounds like it's going up and down. I think that by nature of just the Indian language, I don't think it's called Indian, but I'm just going to go with it. By the nature of the language used in India, I think that they speak through their nose more than a lot of people in the United States. And some people in the United States definitely speak through their nose a lot, but I think that they speak through their nose more. And because they speak through their nose more, it also sounds more nasally, and that might be one of the reasons why they can actually get more tones out of their music. Again, I am not a professional in this, but I think that it is interesting to think about. It's interesting to look into. But it makes a lot of sense to me that a group produces that the music a group produces is in part an extension of their language, because each language has its own type of rhythm. Each language has these underlying rules, I think, that run through all different languages, right? If you go back in time, you can see that the Indian language, I wish I could remember what it was called. I should have looked it up before starting to record. The Indian language and English are actually in the same language family when you go back far enough, right? You go back and there's Proto-Indo-European language. There was a language that each of these branched out from, okay? And I think that each different culture has its own each language sounds differently. I would say that Spanish sounds more musical, and the Romance language sounds more musical than the Germanic languages. And bringing certain ideas or sounds or words from different languages are going to affect your language. It's going to change how your language works. And there are certain languages that come up with certain types of ideas. One of my favorite languages is German, because it sounds very rough. But it's not necessarily because of the roughness of German for why I like that language. The reason I like German, the reason I like German is because for whatever reason, the German language has decided they don't care how many words you smash together to create a new word. So you have these extremely long, convoluted words that are conveying a specific thing. And it is often the case in the German language, at least what I've seen, is that when they come across something new, they just take two old words and smash them together. And they're like, oh, that's what this is now. This is what we call it. And that's how their language functions. So I think it's very fun. And I also like English. I know a lot of people get frustrated at English, but I like English for the very reason why people get frustrated at it. English will borrow from every other language. And this is actually, like I said in the past, one of the reasons why English continued to be a language when England was taken over by the French. The people in England, for whatever reason, there was a cultural aspect, or maybe it was a language aspect. There was a cultural aspect in English where it said, hey, we have these overlords, who were the French, and they speak French. And what the English people who weren't the overlords did is they adopted some French words. They adopted it into their language itself. And this did not happen in the same way in Gaul. It did not happen in the same way where France is now. All these Romance languages are from Latin. They're from Latin. That was because the Romans took over France. They took over Spain. They took over Greece and different areas like that. And what happened in Spain and France is that the Latin, the common Latin that was spoken, usurped the language that was already there. Right? And now one of the only places that speak, is it a Gaelic language? I believe. One of the only places, a couple of the only places that actually speak in that language family are Scotland and Ireland, and they still are in that area. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, if it's Gaelic or not. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. But each of these languages, like I was saying, each of these languages functions differently. Each of these languages sounds different in a different way. Some languages you speak a lot more quickly. Some languages are a lot more rhythmic. I think you can see this in Italian. The Italian language is very rhythmic in a way if you listen to it, and all the Romance languages are very rhythmic in a way because I think most in general they're vowel, consonant, etc. And if you have a vowel followed by a consonant followed by a vowel, you're going to have this up and down rhythmic sounding thing. And I think with Spanish especially, you're ending almost all your words with a vowel, so you're going to have this certain sound with how it goes. And if you are trying to make music, if you are starting with a language, if you're trying to make music, if you're starting with nothing, if you're starting at zero with music, I think what you're going to do is you're going to be starting with singing. You're going to be starting with something like song, whether that's just chanting something. It probably started as a chant, and then it built off of that. And somebody said, hey, we can add certain instruments to this. And you're not going to be adding instruments or melodies or sounds that are going to clash with your language. You're always going to try to fit it together into the thing that sounds the best. And I think for the European language families, what happens is the sounds that sound the best are those 12 tones. And there probably are more than 12 tones that sound good to the European ear. And they probably sound good to the European ear because we are used to speaking in a certain number of tones, or we are used to speaking in a certain way with a certain rhythm. We're putting together words in a specific way. And there is a reason I think that progressive rock and metal are more popular in Northern Europe than they are in Southern Europe. I don't think they are as popular in Southern Europe or France than they are in Northern Europe, and I think it's connected to the language, and it's also connected to the culture, and I'm not saying it isn't, but I think one of the reasons and one of the things that is really interesting to think about is what if you started with nothing? What if you started with no instruments? What if you just started with the language itself, and then you built off the language itself? You would end up in a different area. You would end up with a different system of music if you did it in that way, which I think is extremely interesting. And I think it's not a definitive statement about this. I do make a more definitive statement about writing because I know so much more about writing, but I think that it is a very interesting thought when we think about it this way. And I think it's something that it could be explored more. And I think that we need to, if we're going to look at music, and if you're someone who is in music, but if we're going to look at anybody's music, I think that going back to their root language, going back to their native language is important for understanding how their music progressed and why they made music the way they did. It's not the only thing, and I'm not saying it's the only thing, but I think it has a big influence, and I think it can have a big influence. I think it does have a big influence, and I think we should start there because it is so basic to people. It's so basic to humans and how they function in the world. If you enjoyed this podcast and you want to support me, there's really one simple thing you can do. You can go to danielpoppie.com/newsletter and sign up for my newsletter. And when you sign up, you'll actually be able to get access to my publication roadmap. So that's everything I have planned for pretty much every project I have into the next decade. Again, that is danielpoppie.com/newsletter. You can also find the link below.